the heart of the dry countryside, where the wind carried dust and secrets, there lived a little girl named Maria. Her eyes were too big for her small face, full of dreams that didn't belong to her world. Her hair was as dark as the earth after rain, and her silence spoke more than any words could. She lived with her father João and her stepmother, Dona Conceição. João was a good man, but worn by years of hard work and disappointment. Every day before sunrise, he went out to plow the dry land that never gave enough to feed them properly. While he worked, Conceição ruled the house with an iron hand and a heart as cold as stone. Maria only ate when there were leftovers. If there was bread, she waited until Conceição had finished eating. If there was rice, she waited for her father to fall asleep so she could scrape the burnt bits from the pot. Sometimes there were no leftovers at all. The nights were long and quiet. The walls of that small house were witnesses to her hunger and tears. When everyone else was asleep, Maria would whisper softly, "Dear God, just a small piece of bread. Just a little kindness." Her father didn't see. Conceição was always careful. She smiled sweetly when João came home and lied through her teeth, saying, "She ate plenty. João, I take good care of her." João, exhausted and trusting, never suspected the truth, and so each day passed the same. Maria caught between hunger and hope, waiting for something to change. Then one day, change arrived. A man came riding down the dusty road, Antonio, Maria's godfather. He hadn't visited for months. When he saw the girl, thin and pale, his chest tightened. Her smile was small, her eyes dull. Something wasn't right. He sat beside her, unwrapping a bundle he had brought from the road. Inside was a piece of bread. He offered it gently, but Maria hesitated. "Aren't you hungry, my dear?" he asked. She looked toward the kitchen and whispered, "Stepmother said I can't eat before everyone else." Antonio frowned. "Then eat, my child. I give you permission." Maria looked at him with doubt, but when he nodded, she took a tiny bite. The taste of bread filled her mouth and tears rolled down her cheeks, not just from hunger, but from relief. From that day on, Antonio began to visit more often. He didn't speak much at first. He watched, listened, and soon began to understand the truth hidden behind those quiet walls. One morning, when the sun had barely risen, he arrived unannounced. Conceição opened the door, surprised and annoyed. "Ah, Senor Antonio," she said, forcing a smile. "João isn't home." "I came to see the girl," he replied calmly. He sat down, opening a small parcel again. Bread, cheese, a red apple. Maria's eyes glistened, but she stayed still, waiting for permission. "Go on, my dear," said Antonio softly. "It's for you." Conceição's eyes turned sharp. "She doesn't need that." "There's food here." Antonio met her gaze. "Is that so? Then why does she look like she's forgotten the taste of bread?" The stepmother's lips tightened. Maria stared at the floor, trembling with shame. Antonio knelt beside her. "Eat, child. No one will stop you." Maria took the bread and bit it, tears falling again. He stood, voice firm. "Dona Conceição, forgive me, but I've known this child since the day she was born, and I know when a child's eyes beg for food even if her lips don't speak." Conceição said nothing. Antonio sighed and placed a hand on Maria's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore." When he left, Conceição's rage erupted like a storm. "You want to make me look like a liar?" she shouted. "I didn't say anything," Maria murmured. "Liar! You're just like your mother, weak, useless." She dragged the girl to her room and locked the door. That night, Maria prayed again. "God, please bring him back." The next afternoon, the sound of hooves echoed once more. Antonio had returned. He knocked firmly. Conceição opened, scowling. "Is João home?" he asked. "No." "Then I'll wait." He stepped inside without asking permission. Maria peeked from behind the door. "You should leave, Senor Antonio," Conceição hissed. He ignored her and called softly, "Come here, my dear. No one will harm you while I'm here." Maria walked forward timidly. Antonio's eyes filled with sadness. "I've seen enough," he said. "A child who eats only when there are leftovers. That ends today." Just then, João came home. Covered in sweat and dust, he greeted his friend cheerfully. "Good afternoon, compadre." "What brings you here?" Antonio didn't waste time. "We need to talk." Conceição interrupted, shouting, "He's lying! He wants to turn you against me." But Antonio's voice was steady. "I came yesterday and saw your daughter starving. She only eats what's left." João frowned. "There's food here." "Yes, Antonio said, but not for her. The truth hung heavy in the air. João turned toward his wife. "Tell me that's not true," she screamed. "He's making it up." But Antonio reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread. She ate this as if it were the first bread she'd ever tasted. João's face fell. He looked at his daughter, thin, trembling, eyes downcast, and guilt pierced his heart. "I trusted you, Conceição. I raised her my way." "Your way is cruelty," he said. Antonio stepped closer. "João, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to remind you what love looks like. Protect your child." João turned to Maria. For the first time in years, he truly saw her. He knelt, tears falling. "Forgive me, my little one." Maria hesitated, then threw herself into his arms. He held her tightly. Conceição screamed, smashing a plate against the wall. Antonio stood firm. "Enough. If you can't love her, I will. You won't take her," she shouted. João rose, his voice steady. "She's leaving. She'll be safe." Maria's lips trembled. "Father?" "Go, my daughter. Go with your godfather." Holding Antonio's hand, she stepped out of the house. The setting sun painted the sky red, the color of endings and new beginnings. Behind them, Conceição's curses faded with the wind. Ahead lay a long dirt road, and for the first time, Maria wasn't afraid. They rode in silence. The wind touched her face, and freedom smelled like dust and hope. When they arrived at Antonio's small farm, night had fallen. The smell of coffee and bread filled the air. "Welcome home, my dear," he said softly. "From now on, this is your home too." Inside, an older woman named Dona Zefa smiled warmly. "So this is the girl you've been talking about. You must be starving." Maria ate slowly, savoring every spoonful. Her heart began to thaw. Antonio smiled. "You'll study here. You'll play. You'll be a child again." That night, she slept in a soft bed for the first time. Before closing her eyes, she whispered, "Thank you, God," and slept without tears. Months passed. Maria flourished. She laughed, studied, worked the land, and smiled often. The past still haunted her dreams, but now there was someone to comfort her. One afternoon she asked, "Godfather, why did you help me?" He smiled. "Because a man who ignores injustice loses his soul. And I couldn't let yours die too." Years later, Conceição's life crumbled. João left her. She lived alone, bitter and ill. One day, she sent word that she wanted to see Maria. When Maria arrived, the house was small and dark. Conceição lay weak, her voice barely a whisper. "I knew you'd come. I did terrible things." Maria took her hand. "I forgave you long ago." Tears rolled down the woman's face. "You became kind." "After all I did," Maria nodded. "My godfather taught me that forgiveness is freedom." Conceição closed her eyes and passed peacefully. Maria cried softly, not from hate but compassion. Years rolled on. Maria became a teacher. Antonio grew old, his hair white like the clouds before rain. Every child in the village called her Teacher Maria of the Godfather. She taught them not just letters, but love. Whenever a child came hungry or afraid, she knelt and whispered, "Here, you never have to wait for leftovers." Time flowed like the quiet river behind the house. Maria was now a woman of peace. Her story was known across the countryside, of a child who once starved and learned to feed hearts. One evening, she found Antonio sitting quietly on the porch. "You're thoughtful today, Godfather." He smiled faintly. "Just remembering that day, the bread, the road." "If you hadn't come back," she said, "I wouldn't be here. God always knows where to send us," he whispered. The sun fell, painting gold on their faces. They sat together in silence. One morning, Maria called him for breakfast, but he didn't answer. She found him still, peaceful, with a soft smile. She wept, not in despair, but gratitude. At his grave, beneath a yellow ipe tree, she placed a small piece of bread. "So you'll never forget," she whispered, "that this is how you saved me." Years later, Maria continued teaching. On the wall of her small classroom, painted in blue letters, were the words, "I only ate when there were leftovers. Now I share before I even serve myself." When she grew old, she returned once more to the tree. She sat beneath its shade, smiling softly. "You were right, Godfather. God does everything in perfect time." The wind brushed her gray hair. "When I see a child eat, when I hear laughter, I remember you." She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun, peace, love, and life. And if anyone had passed by that day, They might have heard the wind whisper, "See, my girl? Now there's always enough for you." The Sertone glowed brighter that evening, as if the earth itself rejoiced, because Maria's story had become eternal.